Your ancient Egypt, they're living. What is wrong with the Egypt that we see at museums? Why is this problematic? And how can we do better? There is nearly a piece of Egypt in every single country around the world. Research from the Artifacts of Excavation Project has revealed that hundreds and thousands of ancient Egyptian objects are currently dispersed in 27 countries in 350 institutions. And by institutions, we do not only mean museums. Egypt could be in the most unexpected of places, like someone's attic, a garage in the middle of nowhere in the US, in Jamaica, in Japan, in every single major city around the world, there is a piece of Egypt. And this is particularly due to British-led excavations and British involvement in Egyptian archaeological excavations between 1880 and 1980. Why is this problematic? And why is having Egypt everywhere around the world, the way that it is displayed today, is problematic? Because the Egypt that we see at museums today is an orphaned Egypt, is an Egypt that has no connection whatsoever with its contemporary communities, not only with its contemporary communities, but equally with the other layers of Egyptian heritage. The Egypt that we see at museums today is imagined, is frozen, and is exclusively ancient. The Egypt that we equally see in museums is a concept. It's not a culture. It's not part of world cultures, nor is it part of African collections. It's a myth. It's ancient Egypt. Everything else is sandwiched in between, as the sign at the British Museum here signifies. This is problematic because when conducting visitor surveys in the UK, this revealed a disturbing conclusion, which is most of the visitors are not interested in contemporary Egyptian history or culture. Most of the visitors only want to see ancient Egypt, nothing beyond the pharaonic Egypt that is represented to them in the media, or that is usually the focus of museums today. This is problematic equally because of how this leads to the auctioning of ancient Egyptian artifacts at a very high price, leading to extensive illicit trafficking of Egyptian antiquities and losing them from the public eye and becoming private ownership of single individuals. Today, as museums are urgently confronting their colonial legacies and are looking into ways of repairing or healing the atrocities of the colonial practices that led to having collections from all over the world or from previously colonized community in Western or in European museums, at times illegally, they are confronting these colonial practices in what seems to be a decolonizing turn. Yet this decolonizing turn remains problematic, given how it's very much object-centered. It's quite selective in the sense that while Egypt is geographically in Africa and is geopolitically and socially in Africa, yet Egypt never gets considered as part of wider African collections. Most importantly, it's very much Western-centered, while previously colonized communities have been calling for decolonizing their collections and have been making extensive anti-colonial efforts ever since the colonial existence within these communities. Yet all of these hundreds of years of activism is totally overshadowed by the current decolonial turn that has been decided upon by Western and European authorities. Something else that is quite worrying is how this is very much museum-centered. This is being done for the museum and by the museum and led by and for the museum. What is extensively missing in this whole narrative are the people, the locals within these previously colonized communities. What we've tried to do at the Egypt's Dispersed Heritage Project is trying to identify the right questions to be asked when confronting these colonial collections and their archives. What should we do? How can we decolonize these collections in a way that contributes positively to people's lives today, achieving the two main aspects, or the two should be driving forces of decolonialism, social justice, and social inclusion, which sadly are becoming more and more dismissed within the wider or the current wide decolonial narrative. We've conducted a scoping exercise working with representatives of the various community groups within Egypt, making up the multivocality of Egypt. That is the community of practice, community of interest, and community of place, towards a more people-centered narrative surrounding how should we deal with these colonial practices and how should we use these colonial collections to contribute to people's lives today. Based on these discussions or the scoping exercise that we've been having with the various communities, we've developed the Egypt's Dispersed Heritage Project in direct collaboration with community groups as well as today. Together with the community, we've identified and co-planned an approach that makes our project more of a reciprocal dialogue rather than an initiative. We are having all of the discussions bottom up, that we are mainly guided by sense transparency. There is two-way accountability between us as a project and the community, and that we are mainly relying on local resources and people. We've initiated initially a social media dialogue that started in 2020, which is Nasser, Heba, and our Dispersed Heritage comic series. This was our way into developing a dialogue through which the Egyptians could not only be involved in wider discussions on the heritage discourse that museums and academia seems to be leading today, but equally in providing the communities an opportunity to talk back to us, to respond. Social media has this opportunity that whatever we're posting, the community or the people have an opportunity to respond back and to talk back to us. We've partnered with 5 UK museums dispersed all over the UK as well, from the south to the north, as well as the Egypt Exploration Society, the main funding body behind the British-led archaeological excavations between 1880 and up till today. One major example of the comic series that we've posted online was the comparison that is usually held between heritage and our lives as contemporary Egyptian communities or wider Middle Eastern and North African communities. While our heritage gets the opportunity to be quite mobile in terms of traveling all over the world and being hosted all over the world, us as communities, we tend to struggle to have the same right of travel or to cross borders to the very same countries that host our heritage. The first comic that we created was a response to this fact, and this is usually how most of the Egyptians tend to respond whenever the question or whenever they are made aware of the scale and scope of dispersal of Egyptian heritage through British-led excavations all over the world. Here you will find me talking to Nasser Jr., so I'm telling him, do you know that there are thousands of Egyptian artifacts that left Egypt through British-led excavations and are currently in 27 countries? Immediately, Nasser is wrapping himself in tissue paper, telling me that, can you tell them that there is another mummy that wants to travel? This is our own way of self-mockery towards the fact of how most Egyptians get to be denied visas to the very same countries that host their heritage all over the world, and discussing the socio-political impact of these colonial legacies, or the current impact that the imagined image of Egypt and the fact of how we as contemporary communities are totally invisible and totally dismissed from the story of Egypt in museums today has on us, on the realities of our lives and on our inability to be to travel freely or to be as mobile as our heritage. This came at a moment that between 2011 and up till today, with the political events that has been surrounding the Middle East and North Africa, this showed how while our heritage is perceived as world history and as part of a global story that is priceless, we as the human beings coming from the very same countries were sadly considered as cheap. And this was our commentary on events that has happened in the UK and on wider Europe, where refugees were denied entry, and where at a certain point there was a reporter interviewing refugees on a lifeboat. And this made us reflect on how, if this boat was full of Syrian artifacts, it would have been immediately saved. While when it's holding Syrian human beings, it's not instantly saved, as is the case with heritage. So when the question is posed between our heritage or our lives, our heritage tends to win every single time. And this is not only problematic when it comes to refugees or asylum seekers, but equally to our lives as academics today, where we are usually denied visas to attend conferences discussing our heritage. So this was a comic that we have created responding to the fact of how Egyptians were denied access to the UK to attend an Egyptology conference to be discussing Egyptian heritage that took place in the UK, particularly in Swansea. But all of the Egyptians who have applied to travel to the conference were denied visa to the UK to enter the UK and attend the conference, despite being fully funded by the conference organizers. We have here Nasser coming out of the embassy stating how the amount of paperwork that he had to prepare only to have his visa denied or refused. What he immediately thinks about the idea that comes to him is to convert himself into an ancient Egyptian artifact, and obviously an employee comes out of the embassy taking him off to London. I'll invite you to read furthermore about our project on an open access paper that we have released in 2021 that has a more extensive and a deeper overview of the ideas, the methodologies that led to the creation of these comics, and more examples of the comic series that we have released online. And we would look forward to you sharing our posts online and contributing to our social media accounts and getting into a dialogue with all of us, be it in the UK or in Egypt. Thank you so much.